Welcome to another episode of We Don't Die. I'm your host, Sandra Champlain, author of the best-selling book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And before we start, if these episodes have made a difference in your life, I have a favor to ask. Would you consider making a financial contribution towards the operation expenses of the show? And you may not know this, and the reason why I ask is most shows out there are funded by commercials. And I personally hate commercials, so I've been paying the expenses myself. And things are getting just a tiny bit tight. And I promise, keep the show going no matter what it takes. But I would be grateful if you're interested in contributing. Even a few dollars would help. And you can easily go to paypal.me/Sandra Champlain. But please don't feel obligated because, again, I will keep it going no matter what. And a few people did contribute last month, and I want to thank you for that because it definitely did help. So now on to the show. We are welcoming back the lovely Christine Duminiak. I interviewed Christine on episode 23 about after-death communications, also known as the signs we may receive from our loved ones in the afterlife. In today's episode, we're going to hear from Christine about talking to children about death and the afterlife. Christine is the author of many books, but her books specific to this topic are Heaven Talks to Children and two children's books, Grandpa Visits from Heaven and Grammy Visits from Heaven. Christine is a certified grief recovery specialist and is a regular guest on television and radio shows and speaks often at conferences. Her website is christineduminiak.com. So, without further ado, welcome back to We Don't Die Radio, Christine Duminiak.
Thank you, Sandra. So wonderful to be back here talking to you again, my friend. I just love the work that you're doing.
Thanks. And it's been like almost 2.5 years since we spoke. And
I can't believe it. I miss you.
Oh, I miss you too. And then there I was. I saw you on Fox and Friends. I thought, oh, she's there, and on different television shows. And I see on your website you're popping up here and there. I mean, you are so passionate about making a difference, and I'm so proud of you.
I'm so proud of you too, Sandra, honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's why I thought it was important to bring you back. And then also I have one of your children's books, and I thought there's nothing else out there like this. So I thought we need to talk to Christine again. So Christine, how should we start this episode?
Well, I believe we were going to talk about how a parent or can explain death to probably a young child. I think an older child understands it a little bit better, but a younger child does not realize what's going on, why grandpa isn't coming around or Grammy isn't coming around. So I do talk about this. There's a chapter in my book, Heaven Talks to Children, about how parents can explain death to a young child and an older child. But I guess for purposes of this radio show, we'll want to deal with younger children since they don't really have a clue about the afterlife and things like that so much. So when you have to explain death to a young child, the best way is to explain that the body does not work anymore, but the spirit that looks just like the body lives inside the body. And when the body dies, that spirit just pops right out and flies off to heaven to be with God and angels.
Very sweet and very true.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just as important to visually show a child how this happens. And both of my children's books, Grammy Visits from Heaven and Grandpa Visits from Heaven, have illustrations that show like a body and lying in bed, and the spirit that looks just like the body coming out of the body with the angels and flying off to heaven. So they can visually grasp that concept if they see it. So I think that's why it's so important for children to see it, because how do you explain this unless you really see it? Don't you agree with that, Sandra?
Oh, absolutely.
It makes it much easier. And then in my book, I have like pictures of heaven and God and family members and pets and different activities that children can do in heaven. So they understand that you're just not floating on a cloud, which is what I thought growing up. And even as an adult, until I got into this field, that there's so much busy work and fun work to do in heaven. So the pictures illustrate that it's just not a boring place. It's like being on earth, but better. Because then you can explain to a child that everyone in heaven can fly. They can swim. They can swim in the ocean. They can play with friendly. All the animals in heaven are friendly, so you can play with all the different animals. That there's like playgrounds and swings, and you can like draw and sing and dance, because all these things are true in heaven. There's just everything that we can do here on earth, we can do in heaven, but so much more than what is available to us on earth. And then you also explain that when that loved one, that mother or father, or whoever, the grandfather dies, there's no more boo-boos in heaven. There's no more hurts. They don't die in heaven. So that's also comforting too, to know that they won't hurt also. So, and so that's how I like to approach it. And I'd like to approach it audibly, vocally, where you're explaining it, but at the same time showing the pictures that also explains it to a child.
How about our pets? I mean, because
Yes, so,
our pets go to heaven too? Because I know, being a young mind, I'd like to ask that question too.
absolutely. And they come back and visit us from the afterlife in addition to our loved ones. So, yes, in fact, next year, that's going to be my next book. My
Hmm.
pet visits me from heaven, something along those lines, so they can see what happens to a pet, because that's a pet's so near and dear. It's a family member, really. So
Yeah.
it's touching. And one of the ways when you are explaining death to a child, if they've already had a pet die, they've kind of seen it a little bit, whether it's a goldfish or cat or whatever, and that helps to explain in a way the funeral, that the body doesn't work anymore and that we buried it in a box or whatever. But I don't like to stop at that point, because that's very sad if you
Yes.
realize that that spirit still lives, and that spirit may come back and visit the child. And that's a special, children have a natural gift to see and hear spirits. And because the younger they are, they don't realize the difference between a physical being and a spirit. So sometimes, you know that your mother has died, but your little child is saying, "Oh, hi, Grammy." And so no one can see Grammy but the little child. And so that happens very, very often. There's kind of like no veil at times between children and the spirits that come to visit them and play with them. They often come and play with them. So they teach them things, like they help them tie their shoelaces, and in my book Heaven Talks to Children, they've talked about how Grandpa helps me to surf and things like that. So yeah, and back to pets. Let me go back to pets.
Hmm.
I personally have had pets visit me from heaven. I've had two dogs visit me from heaven. I've had a cockatiel visit me. I've had a pet chicken that I had when I was a child visit me about 2 years ago in a dream, where I got to take care of him again. So yeah, absolutely. Could you believe that? A pet chicken?
Well, this might be the time to come out with it, but I've had a chicken roaming the yard who belongs to a neighbor, and her name is Blanche. I found out from the neighbor, but for some reason, Christine, she likes my yard more than she likes her yard. She's a beautiful black chicken, and she's got quite a following now on Facebook because I put chicken inspiration, like all quotes up, and somebody just challenged me. "You got to talk about Blanche on your show." So there you go.
It's
I
going
know.
to be a perfect lead in for you.
Yeah, but there's so many different types of animals that have personalities, and
Absolutely.
that when we share our love with them, certainly they come back. But I have some questions, and I know
Yes.
you've got more to say. Um, but what about, let me back up a little. I know I've talked to plenty of people on this show that as a child they did see spirits, and they saw people and they thought other people could see them, and then they couldn't, and then
Right.
they stopped sharing about that, and then eventually, a lot of these people went away. The kids grew up. But what about kids that may not be able to see them? Is there another way that we can tell kids that their loved one can come through?
Yes, they
How
can
they
come.
can visit?
Sure, they can come through in dreams. Everyone can experience that. I mean, adults have a harder time sometimes because they don't remember their dreams. But yes, definitely in their dreams, that would be a way, whether you have a gift or not, to see and hear spirits. That when we're in our dream state, it's very easy for them to come through to us. And sometimes people don't understand that they're getting a real visitation from a loved one, and they just think it's a dream. But anything that's vivid and comforting is a real spiritual visit from a loved one. So that would be a way to be on the lookout for it. And in fact, in my book, God's Gift of Love After Death Communications, there's tips on how to receive dream visits, and also on my website too. So they can go to my website
Okay.
and read those tips for a dream visit. But also, if you're looking for an afterlife sign from a loved one and you don't think you're getting one, many times we don't recognize them around us because we just think it's a coincidence. So what I have found is if you just say a prayer to God to allow that loved one to visit you, and then state to your loved one something specific that you would recognize, whether it's a coin, particular coin, a penny, a dime, a butterfly, whatever is your choice, and say, this is what I would recognize from you. And so when you get that specific request, you know you got your sign. And so then be on the lookout for more of the same sign, because once they know that we get it, they will repeat their particular sign because they want us to get it. They want us to know that they're around us.
And I like that you say a prayer to God in the beginning of all this. I know I don't often hear that, and people I've heard are kind of demanding. I've been asking for a sign and nothing comes through. Can you say a little bit about the power
Oh,
of prayer?
oh, absolutely. See, what most people don't understand is that our loved ones can't do anything without God's permission. It's just that they have to go through God because, first of all, God knows whether this will be good for you or not, or whether it would keep you longing to be in a mental state away, or emotional state away from reinvesting in life again, or whatever. So it's always a gift from God because He knows you. He knows you. So you always need to thank God for anything, any blessing that you have in your life. And that will bring you more. And so it's a way for you to get closer to God, to understand that He loves you and He's there for you. And trust in Him. Now, a lot of people will be impatient after they put their request out to God and their loved one. But just, let it be in God's timing, because He might be trying to heal you in a different way that you're not aware of. So, yeah, God is the giver of everything good. So always don't bypass Him. Maybe that's what He's waiting for you to come to Him so you can establish a stronger relationship, a closer relationship with Him. So you will benefit from that in the long run, knowing how much you're loved. We're all God's special kids here on earth, and every one of us means so much to God. It's like any parent, if we had, just picture one parent over all of us, and we're all so special to Him. So He wants us to know that. And part of that is to go to Him and ask Him for things. And some people don't like to pray for themselves, but really, they're robbing themselves of that personal relationship they could be having with God, and which is the greatest source of comfort ever. So, don't bypass God. He wants you to reach out to Him, and He won't interfere in your life unless you ask. Although there are people that get afterlife signs without praying for it, but that's also another gift from God. So that's what, and I have found the people who seem to have a connection to God seem to feel at peace and acceptance much faster than people who don't have any relationship with God. There's such a striking difference, because I have this Facebook group called After Death Communications and Prayer Wave, where we pray for people to get a sign from their loved one. And I've always noticed, and I established this in the year 2000, started as a message board, and now it's the Facebook group. But the people that have like a faith in God and a relationship with God seem to do so much better with their pain and healing when they have that relationship with God, versus the people that don't. They seem to just, I don't know, they just seem to be kind of like treading water and not really getting past that point.
It's a good conversation, Christine, because I know I've studied a bunch, not a ton, but quite a bit of the power of prayer and healing, and incredible the results that have been proven, like the difference that prayer makes. And then even the power of gratitude. And somebody had once said to me, and it was pretty, I think it was one of these episodes, that, if you imagine your grandmother giving you a gift and you don't say thank you, well, how much is she going to want to give you another gift? But when you give somebody something, it's like, oh my God, Grandma, that was the best. Well, next thing you know, Grandma's thinking of something else she can give you, and then something else. And so it really is, just playfully said, when we are really honestly grateful, not just looking for more stuff, but really honestly grateful, who wouldn't want to continue to give? It's like, oh, look at, she loved all those unexpected pennies or all the feathers, or, what else can I do? What else can I conjure up? And, the whole God conversation, even with me, I mean, I know, Christine, I do have my faith. But do I have an active relationship with anyone in the unseen world? Not so much. It's just, I'm human. I'm on the journey as well. I think we all are. But to know and really trust both in God and in our loved ones. I mean, there's this unseen world that's around us. I mean, we all trust the internet's real because things are happening, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to see it to believe it. Right. And what a way of living life, to really trust that we aren't alone. And I can get it. We'd have just a more peace-filled, powerful life.
It's so
really
comforting.
Getting it.
It's so comforting. And if people will look back through their life and look at the times where their prayers have been answered, in small ways even that were important to us, or even big ways where there was some kind of a divine intervention that saved you from death, for instance. They just have to, go back and look, because if you just think, what has God done for me today? And maybe that won't cut it. But if you go back and review your life a little bit and see how many times God has answered your prayers. Now, here's something really funny that I don't usually tell people. But when I was about 14 or 15, I was getting these warts on my wrist. Mm-hmm. And I had them removed. They were burnt off by the doctor. And it was very, very painful. And I thought, well, that was the end of it. Never have to go through that again. And a while later, they start growing back again. Now, I didn't, I didn't really, I wasn't that close to God, although I went to Catholic school, so I did pray and all that. And I remember praying to God to please take away these warts so I don't have to go through that burning off again, because that was terrible. Very soon thereafter, the warts just disappeared on their own. Now, whose warts disappear? That doesn't happen. Once they're there, they're there. And I thought, oh. As a kid, I'm thinking, I guess that was God. Was that God? How'd that happen? But that's what I prayed for. And I think God was trying to show me that I hear you, Chris. I hear you. Okay, I'm going to do this for you so you'll believe in me. You see?
Yep.
And so at the time, I thought, well, this is quite a coincidence. I prayed it. But now when I look back, I thought, God wanted me to, showing me he was there for me. And he did it in this way that was important to me. So, you see? So if you look back and see how things in your life have been answered by God. Yeah. And another thing about afterlife signs, I want people to, you were talking about getting a gift and acknowledging the gift. Well, some people think, oh, I think that was a sign that I just got. And instead of saying thank you and accepting the gift, they analyze it to death and they analyze it away. And then what they're doing, they're disappointing their loved one and God, because that was meant for their joy and comfort. And they're just so into the scientific aspect of it and analyzing it from all angles. And I always say, if you're going to err on the side of accepting the gift, you know, don't just analyze it away. And you'll start to see, if you do that, that more will come because they'll know that you're accepting of it now.
It's true. And whatever you focus your attention on, I find seems to happen. You going on a trip to Hawaii, and next thing you know, you see Hawaiian shirts everywhere before you go on the trip, right? Now those Hawaiian shirts are probably always there, but you didn't pay attention to it. So when we start, I like that, making the request of a specific sign, and then be on the lookout for it. And I would think it would take a lot of work and creativity for our loved ones to manipulate energy to have something show up in our path. So the little things that are relatively available, whether it's the pennies, the dimes, the feathers, the even getting us to look down. My thing that keeps happening is I keep seeing the number 33,
Oh,
and it's interesting because I tie that in to just kind of a remember who you are, Sandra. This is a, kind of it is a divine message to me. But when times are tough, or if I'm stewing in something, even I just had a 2-hour drive home before I called you, Christine, and our minds can get the best of us. I mean, I'm worrying about things from the past and the future, and thinking, "Oh, come on, Sandra, just be present." None of these things are real, but but our mind creates these worries and everything. And just then I looked down at the license plate in front of me and it's 333. It's like, oh, okay, all
oh,
right, I get it. But I mean, it happens all the time.
oh, that's great.
Yeah. And it's just my little sign. It's just something, my personal sign to just get over it, like get back in the present
Exactly.
moment. There's a much bigger picture going on. Can you tell us some stories, Christine? Well, first of all, if you don't mind, some of our listeners have not heard episode 23 way back when. And just say a little bit about yourself. What makes you more of an expert in the world of the afterlife, and being able to write a sign, and like how is it that that Grammy and Grandpa do visit from heaven?
Okay, so back in 1998, I was just like everyone else, but thought, oh, heaven's just a place where you float around on clouds, and that was a boring place. And I really wasn't into any of the afterlife information because I had not really lost anyone uh, of my immediate family. Although years before that, I did lose a pregnancy, but I just felt like, well, it was like nature's way of taking care of something that was imperfect. And even though it hurt, I was able to, you know, get over that. And luckily, I did get pregnant again. So I really didn't think so much about anything. I didn't think that there was a spirit with that child or anything like that back at the time. So back in 1998, my dead in laws showed up in my bedroom one night and they stayed for an hour. And I woke up my husband to tell them that his parents were in the room. And this is in the beginning of my book, God's Gift of Love After Death Communications. I explain how I got into this field. And the same with Heaven Talks to Children, I explain it. And so prior to this, if anyone talked to me about anything spiritual, about afterlife signs, and my eyes would just glaze over because I couldn't identify with it. I'm sure a lot of people who have not lost a loved one felt the same way too, thinking, oh, this is really woo-woo.
Right.
When you have dead people show up in your bedroom, you take another look.
Yeah.
So, and then they kept coming back night after night. I thought, well, they're trying to tell me something. What is it they're trying to tell me? So I went on a quest to find out everything that I could. And Judith Guggenheim, the co-author of Hello from Heaven,
Yeah.
recommended that I get in touch with this Christian medium, Sunny Wells. And I did. I asked to speak to my guardian angel to find out what the heck all this meant, what was going on. And being a Christian, we're not encouraged to go to mediums. So,
Right.
so I'm a Catholic. So, same with Catholics. And so, but I felt really comfortable with her because her belief system was similar to mine, and she told me how to protect myself when spirits show up in the room, and asking Jesus to protect me and things like that. So, and I felt very comfortable with that. So I figured, well, she's not some person that has way out there beliefs that don't jive with mine. That's why I felt comfortable with her. So we talked to my guardian angel, and he explained that I had a mission from God. It was up to me to accept it or not, and that I was going to be helping people spiritually and emotionally, and eventually with touch healing. And he gave me ways to start getting into that field, suggestions. And he said the reason why my in-laws came, they were just coming to say hello, and there's nothing to fear about it. There was no health issues or anything like that, warnings. And after this first, and they said that Sunny was going to be my mentor. So, and it was meant to be that I would connect with her. So Sunny never charged me for a session, and she's still one of my best friends, and we do seminars together when we can. And that was back in 1998. So, so I get to speak to now my parents who have both passed, and my brother-in-law who has passed, and my in-laws. I've gotten to talk to them through Sunny. And so this is how many times we just have sessions with the angels to find out, well, what's heaven like? Well, what are you doing? So here's a fun tip for people who are wondering what you can do in heaven. My parents used to bowl here on a mixed team together. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, we still bowl in heaven. My mother said, now we can cheat, but everyone here would know about it. So we
funny.
don't. And my dad, who was my favorite golf partner, there's a sort of type of a golf in heaven that he plays, and my mother has learned how to play. And she said, yeah, even though I've learned how to play, sometimes I'm still a golf widow up here. So they've always loved to dance here on earth. They won some jitterbug dance contests together. They dance in heaven. They go to like musical concerts kind of thing. And they're just always on a learning curve, always learning, doing, and helping people who have newly crossed over to help them orient to heaven. So, there's so much to do.
Christine, there. I've got a quick story. When my dad was ill in his final weeks on earth, I came clean about me studying the afterlife. And Dad, heavy-duty Catholic, went to church every day. And I was so afraid that he would think I was nuts for, it being interested in mediumship and all of these things. But I felt like I had to tell him. So, I remember him with these big eyes listening to me, just like, oh my gosh, what is she saying? And then I told him I took a course on mediumship, and he's like, okay, honey, okay. And then all of a sudden, and I haven't practiced as a medium, but all of a sudden in my mind's eye, I saw this man, and I saw a yellow airplane. They call him a tail dragger with the wheel in the back, and it was yellow with black lettering. It was a Piper Cub, and I just heard, I think I got the man's name, Jim, and I said, Dad, I've got to tell you something, and this is going to sound weird, but I'm hearing in my mind a man, and he's laughing, and he's calling himself Jim, and he's showing me this airplane that's yellow with the black lettering and the tail dragger. And I said, he's laughing, saying to tell you that you are wrong, that I did get to bring my toys with me. Well, Christine, my dad burst into tears.
Oh, wow.
And he said, my dad was a cancer survivor from 30 years before he ultimately passed away from cancer. But Dad went on to helping people with cancer. And his famous line was saying, you got to beat this because you can't take your toys with you. Jim was a friend of his who owned that yellow airplane.
Oh, how validating is that?
And so it was after that Dad said, I want to know everything, Sandra, everything.
Oh.
And then, and this makes me cry, but he said, before he passed, he said, you promise me you write a book. You promise me, and you help people. And I thought, oh, so that's how this all got started, is my promise to my
Isn't
pop.
that
But I'll
beautiful?
never forget
So
that.
beautiful. And do you know how comforting that must have been for your dad,
Yeah.
knowing that there was fun beyond this life?
Because, yeah, Dad's a pilot. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. Because that's the unknown is the scary part for people. What's beyond, or is it boring? I used to think heaven would be boring. And one of the books that I read was Embraced by the Light by Betty Eady.
Hmm.
She had a near-death experience, and that was one of the most detailed experiences taking all around heaven about what you can do there that so impressed me that took my fear of dying away. And I think this was before even my in-laws showed up in my bedroom. I'm not really sure. Maybe around the same time. Maybe around the same time. I can't really remember. But I do know after my in-laws showed up in my bedroom, speaking about comforting your parents, I went to see my parents the next day and told them all about the spiritual visit, the apparitions, and they were so mesmerized. And then I had them both read "Embraced by the Light" so they wouldn't be afraid to die. And my talks with them about my in-laws showing up and really help them not be afraid to die. So just like you, that message from beyond for your dad, from your dad's friend Jim,
Hmm.
helped your dad relax about dying.
And I hate to say this, but there's a level of faith that we have with our religion, with our beliefs in the afterlife, and that's all good, fine. But then to hear a story like my dad heard and to
Yeah.
witness those tears, and I'm
Yes.
sure there's still fear for the end, no matter how much our faith is, but to have a knowing or a real belief or hear a story like that, wow,
Oh,
to be able to leave this earth
best
in
gift.
peace.
That was the best gift that you could have given your dad to take
Yes.
fear away. I mean, we all fear the process of dying. No one
Oh,
wants to go
yeah.
through that. But what's on the other side is so exciting that, after I read Embraced by the Light, I said, beam me up, Jesus. This is where I want to be.
Beam me up, Jesus. That's pretty funny. Oh, that's funny. Do you have some stories for us about how loved ones have shown up to children?
Well, usually with children, they show up in spiritual presence. So the younger they are, the more that they can see them and they don't even realize they're seeing a spirit. Now, as a child gets a little older, maybe around 5, they start to realize that what they're seeing is a spirit, and yet they can still be really comfortable with it. And then sometimes the gift will stay on forever because they were meant to see and hear spirits, that to be a medium or whatever, and it's always about helping other people. It's always about service work for God. And so yeah, with children, it's actually seeing. So as adults, we wish that we all had that ability to see our loved ones again. And the best way that is going to really happen, the most real way, is in a dream where you get to see them and talk to them or hug them or whatever. And for children, they don't leave coins for children. They just show up. And even babies, babies see spirits from the time they're born. And of course, that baby, that spirit of that baby knew, if like your dad had passed and then you had a child, that child would already know your dad in heaven before he came here, because every one of us are created spirits in heaven with God before we take on our physical bodies and come to earth. And that's when we're in heaven, we make these spiritual agreements with God about a rough blueprint of what our lives are going to look like, how we're going to die. And we volunteer for these things because we want to learn from it, overcome challenges, and we want God and us, when we're in heaven, we have the understanding that there's going to be a wonderful ripple effect to around the people that are around us in our lives here on earth. So anyway, that spirit actually knew, say, your dad in heaven before it came here on earth. So your dad could be playing with that spirit, say, during the pregnancy, and definitely after the baby is born. Just recently, one of my nephews had a baby, and he was kind of sad that my parents wouldn't know the baby. So I knew it differently, but anyway, when Sonny and I got to talk to my mother about the baby, they said, "Oh my gosh, we play with him all the time, and he can see us."
Wow.
So I told him and my nephew, and that was like the biggest gift I could have given him, to know that my parents were there playing with him and they see him. And I said, so sometimes when he's like laughing at nothing, he's looking off to the ceiling or off to the side and he's smiling and laughing. That's when they're there. That's when they're there. So look for that. Look for that.
Christine, do you have any stories of children who have maybe said a name and like that they couldn't possibly know?
Yes,
Anything like that?
yeah, there's a lot in my book. There's about 107 in my book, Heaven Talks to Children, and which is all about that. And
Can you give us one of your favorite stories?
yes,
107. So yeah, there's
right,
more than
right,
one.
right.
Great.
So there was one where a mom had a 2-year-old or 3-year-old, and she had a newborn. And the newborn's baby name was Tyler. And so Tyler unfortunately died a few months old from SIDS.
Oh,
And so the mother was trying to explain to her other child, the 3-year-old, that he was in heaven now, and that anytime and they were outside, and she was showing him the sky, and anytime you want to talk to Tyler, you just talk to him and look at the sky and talk to him. And so the 3-year-old looked really perplexed, and he said, "Well, Mom, why can't I talk to him now? He's sitting right here." And she saw his hand, look like it was holding somebody's hand. Okay, and then he said, "And Tyler said to tell you not to cry on Monday." So he said, "What's happening on Monday?" And she said, "Well, on Monday we're having a funeral for Tyler. Remember, like when we buried your goldfish? Well, we put him in a box, but that's what we're doing for Tyler." So the little boy looks off to the side, he shakes his head, and he said, "Tyler said to tell you it's only going to be his body. He's not going to be in it."
wow.
So, so there you go. I mean, how does a 3-year-old know that unless the spirit is telling him that?
That's
Oh, and I'm
incredible.
sorry. Tyler said, "Don't be sad. Don't be sad. It's just his body, but he won't be in it." Yeah, don't be sad.
Boy,
Hmm.
if we really got that when we grieve, we're grieving us missing that person. And so many times we think, yeah, their life was cut short and the what ifs. And I don't think we'll truly understand till it's our time to pass over. What do you call it? What do you call it?
I,
Transition, death, pass over?
I don't really call it death so much because that's such a final word to
Yeah, it
me.
is.
I like Passover. I like that, or Passover. That's what I like to use because you're just passing over to the other side.
Yeah, transition sounds kind of funny.
Okay.
Um, anyways, but when that moment comes that we open our eyes, close them one last time here and open them again and see like what an incredible, real, awesome place it is. And if we could only get that while we're on earth,
Yeah, like
really
people
get it that like
yeah,
they're fine. It's us that's not.
that's right, exactly. And like they have no pain. It's just such a wonderful place full of joy and feeling God's all-encompassing love, unconditional love. And people are afraid of God. I remember growing up, going to Catholic schools, being taught by nuns that that God was always angry at us. And so it was hard to establish a feeling of love towards God if he's always mad at me. So as I got older, I think maybe it was around 20 or older teenager, it really bothered me about God. And I thought, well, how can God be really angry at us all the time? Because I was thinking about Jesus seemed to love everybody. So I found this picture in some kind of a shop with Jesus sitting down, all these children around him. And I bought that picture, and it's still hanging up right beside me right now to remind me of how loving God is. And he's not angry at us. And that was maybe the God of the Old Testament before Jesus showed us another way. And but he's truly a God of love. I think God of the Old Testament was trying to keep all these people in line. They were so bad.
Yeah.
But the true nature of God is one of love. And
Christine, how do you explain, this is just your own beliefs, because I know, if a young person like Tyler gets taken away, or, a child that never gets time. I mean, so many people get angry at God.
right.
What do you, because I know you've got quite a bit of time helping people through grief. I mean, would you give any sort of explanation? I mean, did Tyler have his death pre-planned?
Yes. See, that Tyler's soul, when he was in heaven, signed up to go home back early because there was a bigger spiritual good that was going to come out of all this. It was part of his plan. And usually children that come down like this are known as angel unawares, which means that their spirit consciousness has reached that angelic level, which we're all trying to reach, that angelic level. And so not that he was born an angel, but his spirit had reached that angelic level. And so his mission was to come down and be here very briefly, because there was going to be a really much greater good to come out of that. And of course, and it was meant to be to whoever was affected by his passing. It could be maybe he's helping in SIDS research, or, maybe family to appreciate the gift of life while we're here. There's just so many. We don't know all the reasons why. Only God knows the reasons why. So, but there's always meant to be a greater good. We're not being punished. I mean, I know someone who is a gynecologist, and the first time his wife got pregnant, she lost the baby. She had a miscarriage, and she eventually went on to have children. But I understood that was sort of like obvious to me, because how could he be in that field and not understand, if a mother loses a child, what it means to her? But because it touched his life personally, then he could have greater empathy for all the women that came to him that may have had a miscarriage.
Very true.
So it wasn't meant to hurt them, but it was meant to help his patients, that came to him. That's how I analyze it anyway.
No, that's good. Do kids continue to grow up in the afterlife?
They have a choice. They can continue to grow up, or they can be instantly back to an adult spirit. It depends on them, whatever they want to do. So yes, they definitely do.
And we get reunited when it's our time.
Yeah. And so when they're children, like for instance, I had said that I had a miscarriage, and so that little one came to visit me, and so I asked about it one time, talking to my in-laws through Sunny Wells, and they said, well, she was about 9 years old then. At that time, she was growing up in heaven, and they were taking care of her, and that she loved to sit on her grandfather's knee, and he would sing to her. And so, it was really very comforting to hear that she was growing up in heaven with them. You see, they were taking care of her.
Yeah. Oh, Christine, this is so good. I want to get my hands on your second book about Grandpa.
Oh, and before we go, I just want to give parents how they can help their children with grief recovery.
Yeah, we're not in any hurry, so you just say what you like.
All right. So for young children, and maybe older children too, you can make them a hug pillow, where, say, if their dad died, you could get a picture and have it transferred onto like a pillowcase. And then if they want to hug their dad, it's sort of like something tangible that they can hold on to. Maybe a special stuffed animal or something that they can connect to their dad. You can make a quilt out of the loved one's clothes. You could piece it all together and make a quilt, or you could take parts of their clothes and put it, sew it on top of a quilt, so they can feel like they're being surrounded by the love of their dad or whomever. It's important. They can write them letters. See, if you don't understand that our loved ones still see and hear us and they're around us a lot, you'd think it might be foolish or
Right.
to write them a letter, but they do. And the letter, they see you writing the letter. They hear those thoughts and those words to them. So it brings them to you. And so you can read the letter out loud. Little children can draw pictures to their dads or whomever that passed, and they can like save them in a special album for their dad. But and their dad just may show up and visit them too. So to show them that he, in a dream or in person, or in real time, to show them that he gets it, that he hears them. And I think the most important thing for people to know is that their loved ones continue to be a part of their lives. They still see and hear them. And when you realize that, it's like a warm, comforting shawl being over your shoulders, that you're not alone, that they're still a part of your life trying to help you in every way that they can. And another way for children to celebrate is to, say it's an anniversary or their dad's birthday, they can have balloons, let go and go to heaven. And you can, I think the parents or the mother, if it's the dad, could still have a cake to celebrate that loved one's birthday. And I think it's important to keep the memory alive through photos of them, through videotapes. I think it's just important to do that so you don't feel like they're gone and forgotten.
Even having a seat at a Thanksgiving table,
Yes,
if you have an extra chair,
exactly.
yeah.
I do remember though when my dad died, he was the first one in our family to go, and the first Easter came around, and I thought, how am I going to look at that empty chair? It's going to so really hurt. And then my brother-in-law went over and he sat down in my dad's chair, and I thought, what? And I thought, oh, thank you. Thank you for filling that chair.
Yeah.
I don't have to look at that empty chair. So everyone's different.
Exactly.
And it helped me. Oh, by the way, that my younger sister never believed in afterlife signs, and she used to walk out of the room when my mama and I were talking about them. And she was almost estranged for us in that topic of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't push her on it. So that same Easter, she went out to the cemetery to visit our dad's grave, and she said, "Daddy, Daddy, just talk to me, talk to me, talk to me." And she heard in her head, "Take care of mommy, take care of mommy, take care of mommy." And here's someone who didn't believe,
Right?
And that was Easter, So. And that started her on the road to believing all these things, which have really helped her a lot in her healing, especially after my mother passed, who she was especially close to. Yeah.
Sure. We're each on our own individual journey. We don't have to, go by what everybody else says, or if somebody says, well, that's crazy, it can't be. We don't have to listen to that. I mean, really, I really encourage all of us to look for our own truths, and most of the times that I've had that jackpot luck, like I had with the seeing that airplane, it's when I was willing to use my imagination and had the courage to open my mouth. And so to trust, and you don't have to talk to people about this if you don't want to, but really to pray and ask for signs and be grateful. And
I would say share them with people who are like-minded, not people who are, skeptics and that would make fun of you. But I do remember after I had that first session with the angels, I got into reflexology, hand and foot reflexology, so I could put my hands on people with the touch healing. And I found that God was constantly sending to me people who were grieving. And sometimes I would see this broken heart around them, during my work on them. And I thought, oh my gosh, one after another. So I finally said, are you grieving anybody? And then they would open up and I'd say, well, did you get any visits from them? Maybe in a dream or whatever. I opened it up like a dream is a safe way because most people dream. And it opened up the conversation. And then they could share with me and I could share with them what to be on the lookout for. So, and many times they can't share this with people because they're afraid that people will think they're hallucinating or, crazy or just in deep grief. And this is just all product of their imagination. So, yeah.
What's the name of your Facebook group again? Because
Okay. Sure.
if people can people join it if they're
Oh,
interested?
yeah, yeah. It's a private group. What you have to do is just ask to join. It's called After Death Communications and Prayer Wave because we pray for people to get a sign from their loved ones. That was the whole point of it. And we do that every Friday. And but if you go to my website, ChristineDuminiak.com, there's a link to be able to link right onto that Facebook group also.
Yeah, it's so important, I feel, to have like-minded people to be able to talk about this too. Because, I know what it's like to, even when I came out with my book, I was scared to death what people would think. Oh my God.
Well, me too, because my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, it was a priest. And so, being a Catholic, like, how could I share this with him? So I started to tell him about his parents visiting me and they wished you a happy birthday, and so he was, because they're not educated in this in the seminary,
Right.
they tend to want to stay away from everything, which is kind of strange because look at all the formal saints that have made apparitions, okay?
Right.
But they're worried that, Satan could be involved and, you're getting like messages that aren't true. And that's a legitimate concern. But from being with Sunny and having her be my mentor, I knew how to ask for God's protection and rebuke and things like that. So I felt very safe when someone was communicating with me because I always faithfully did this. And so we would go to lunch together and I would always walk away crying because, he wasn't supportive at all. He was like, stay away, stay away. And so I finally said, we have to agree to disagree. So then after he retired and he was in a retirement home for priests, and I was so afraid to tell him about my first book, God's Gift of Love, After Death Communications, which was all these people's afterlife stories and identify the 20 common ways that people are visited from the afterlife. And I said, and I was afraid it was going to come out on the news because I knew I was going to be on TV and in the newspaper, and I didn't want him to hear it secondhand.
Right.
See if the other priests recognized the last name. So I told him about it, and he was actually proud of me, and he started selling my books to the other priests. I said, what?
Wow.
I never expected that. So then, after he passed, I got to talk to him through Sunny Wells, and I used to tell people how he used to make me cry and everything, and he really wouldn't, go into the conversation with me. The first thing he said was, well, Chris, I guess I owe you an apology. I should have investigated what you were telling me. And that was so healing for me to hear him say, I should have apologized instead of making me cry all the time. And I said, you know what, Jack, I knew you were trying to protect me. I got that. And he said, yes, I was trying to protect you. But he said, I should have explored it more with you so he could really understand it. And, but again, it's the Catholic training and the seminary. It's like, stay away from everything. I feel, unless it's like an apparition from a saint, So they don't realize that the informal saints who are our loved ones also have apparitions and ways of communicating with us. So, yeah, so that was very nice. That was gratifying to hear him apologize.
Christine, is there any protection thing that we should all be doing when we're
Yes,
talking to our loved one?
Yeah, I have that in Heaven Talks to Children to protect children. But this is what there's a very simple form that you could just say Jesus or God if you're not a Christian to protect me. If you are a Christian, you'd say, Jesus, please protect me and any spirits around me who are, please bind and rebuke Satan and all his followers and all those who are not committed and in service to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And so what Sunny does is she asks that spirit if they are committed to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and they have to answer yes. If they don't answer yes, she will not communicate with them because she knows it's a false spirit trying to give her false messages and her clients false messages. So she binds and rebukes Satan and then asks them those questions as a testing thing. So I have that in my book, Heaven Talks to Children. I have a simple form for anybody no matter what your belief system is. And then I have one for Christians, um, because they understand about Satan and demons, and they, that would be good for them. And I'm updating my book, God's Gift of Love After Death Communications. And it's going to be in there also how to do that, to safely communicate with spirits. So I have a chapter in both books, Heaven Talks to Children, and this new one coming out, an updated version, that talks about the Bible and spirit communication in the Bible in the New Testament. Because many times Christians are given a gift of the Holy Spirit, and they have to, their church leaders who think they are protecting them, or trying to protect them, don't realize that this is a gift of the Holy Spirit, and then how to do this, and how they can do it responsibly and to protect themselves. So that's why I updated my new edition of that book that will be coming out in a few weeks. And so they would feel relaxed with the gift. And I quote scripture, which will help them feel okay about it and not to turn away from their faith because of, what maybe clergy might say to them. If God has given you a gift to use, it's not a sin to use it. It's expected of you to use it.
Yeah. I know talking about religion and Jesus and God, and sometimes it can get controversial because people believe in all different stuff. And I heard somebody, it was really great. They were comparing God to like a light bulb, something like that. That there's all these different lamps and lampshades and shapes and sizes and all that all over the world, but the light remains the same.
Right.
And so that for
That's a good
me,
analogy. I like that.
for me, no matter where somebody's at, look for what resonates. And I've not really done too many prayers of protection, but what I notice I have done is anytime I've done things, I've just imagined this pure, safe, white light surrounding like a bubble, and there is a prayer there, and there is the intention. So that might just be my way of doing it,
Mhm.
but
Well, if you have either one of my books, if you have Heaven Talks to Children, there's a chapter on there, and I think it would give you comfort to even know more about how to protect
yeah,
yourself,
yeah.
and why.
So great. And now I'm looking at time going, oh, we got to wrap things up. And thank you, obviously. But can you just tell us, let's get back to Grandpa Visits from Heaven and Grammy Visits from Heaven. I've read Grammy, and I called my Grammy, so I love that. But what's the difference with the two books?
Okay, so one is the Grammy is like a young child's relationship with their grandmother, and then her grandmother dies, and so you can see visually how she goes off with the angels to heaven, and how there's a big party for her up there, and God tells her she's a really good Grammy, and
Sweet.
yeah, and then the little girl, really misses her grandmother, and God hears her prayer because she asked for her grandmother to come back and play with her one more time. And so God was very touched by her prayer, and he sends her grandmother back, and their favorite thing to do was to swing on her yellow swing. Her feet couldn't touch the ground, and one day she was out there very sad, missing her grandmother, and she got this big push. And the grandmother spends the whole day with her, and then you see her fly off to heaven, and she says, I'll be back for all your big occasions, for when you go to first day of school and your birthdays, and I'll visit you in my dreams, and sometimes you'll see me and sometimes you won't, but I'm always with you. Now, the one with Grandpa Visits from Heaven, it's a boy's relationship with his grandfather, so they're doing more boy type things, like they would go camping together and stay overnight. They would roast marshmallows, and they would go fishing together and walk through woods and talk to the animals and things like that. And the grandson used to go up the mountains to his grandfather's mountain house every summer and spend his vacation or his time with him. And then he was all packed, ready to go, when his mother has to tell him that his grandfather died and that he won't be going up there to play with him, but for the funeral. So then that gives the mother the opportunity to explain, that he died, and his spirit that looks just like him popped out of his body, went off with the angels to heaven. And you see that picture so the child can visualize, can see it in front of them. And then the little boy is so upset because he didn't get a chance to say goodbye to his grandpa. So they go back up to the mountains. They're packing up the house. The little boy's really sad, and he goes to bed, and he prays to God that tell my grandpa that goodbye and that I love him. So God sends his grandpa back to visit him, and he's like so surprised, the little boy, and he explains what happened, that he'll be with them always. I'll be like an angel on your shoulder, and they play a little bit. And he said, I'll be back again to visit you, and I'm coming to all your special occasions. And then his grandfather goes off to heaven when you see him flying off to heaven again. So it's like maybe one's more appropriate from a little girl. You see them like going to the grandmother going to the beach together and giving her a bath and with her swing. Whereas the little boy does more like they're playing video games and the camping and the fishing and kind of that kind of thing. So whatever one seems appropriate for in your particular case, that would be the book to get. Oh. But both of them have the same central theme, that they are watching over them in heaven. God hears their prayers, and they come back to visit them and play with them.
So let me ask you, imagine that as a youngster, mom or dad or anybody reads this book with a child, and that child really gets it and now starts this relationship and trust that Grammy and Grampy and the dog and everybody is still there. What's potential for that little kid to grow up like as an adult? What kind of person could that be?
Oh, I think they wouldn't be so afraid of death. I think that's a really big one, because we all know as we go along that we're all going to die, and everyone's fearful of dying.
Yeah.
On the other side. But if you think your Grampy is on the other side, and your pet's on the other side, and God's on the other side, and there's all these fun things to do in heaven, which are illustrated, the fun things to do in heaven, you won't be afraid to go there like I was as a child, because I thought you just floated around on a cloud.
Yeah, really good. And I think, too, when you're not afraid of dying and death, you're not as afraid of life, and you can put your life into perspective, that we must be here to learn and to grow and to forgive and share and play and be grateful and pray and all that stuff.
And also, if there's someone you really love and you know that they're still a part of your life and they still hear you and see you, then it's not like they've gone off into a black hole either. Yeah. And so that's very important for adults and children to know.
Yeah, because grieving can take years away from our lives.
People say, my dad didn't see me get married. Well, he did. He was there. And that these are the points that they're trying to get across to us with their afterlife signs. They don't miss a trick when it comes to our lives. And if people knew that, it would be so comforting for them to internalize that and just keep on talking to them. Keep on talking to your loved one.
That's a good advice for anyone. And for all of us, even though these two are children's books, she's got plenty of adult books out as well, but there is a child inside each one of us. And to just get it from a child's perspective that you're not alone and they are part of your life, it's a pretty big deal. So, Christine, one more time, your website is?
Well, I'll spell it out.
Okay.
Because I have a funny last name spelling. It's CHRISTINIAK.com. And my books are on the website too.
Yep, you have it all. And then also, should you be listening to this on YouTube, if you just scroll down to the description of this episode, I have got links to Christine's website, her books, her After Death Communication and Prayer Wave Facebook group, and yeah, that's it. And also, just as a quick invite to you who's listening, you may have heard me say this before, but probably not if this is your first episode. I just started a Facebook group too with my listeners, people that are passionate about learning more and want some friends that they can openly discuss this with.
Oh, very
And
nice.
it's just been awesome in just a matter of
It's
just
called
over a
We
week's
Don't
time.
Die.
You type in oh, thanks for asking. We Don't Die Listeners. Just type in We Don't Die Listeners into the search box. But just in a matter of a week and a half, or well over 300 members. So that tells me that people are listening, which I'm ever so
Wonderful.
grateful. And lastly, if anyone wants to meet me in person, which would be fun, September 15th through 17th, I'm going to be speaking at something called the Afterlife Research and Education Symposium, which will be in Scottsdale, Arizona. And if you want to find out more, afterlifestudies.org is the website, all about afterlife communications, what's happening with the cutting edge of afterlife proof, end of life stuff, lots of good things. And on the night of the 14th, I'm actually flying in the daytime of the 14th, the day before it all starts, but it's going to be at the Embassy Suites in Scottsdale. Who's ever there around happy hour on the 14th, I'm going to be in the lobby wearing my bright blue shirt so you recognize me. And it's just an opportunity to meet each other. There's going to be several hundred of us actually from that listen to this show there. And I would definitely like an opportunity to say hello and give you a hug and just meet you face to face. So go to
I have to say,
afterlifestudies.org.
I've been at a seminar where we were both keynote speakers with Sandra, and she is the most loving, warm person. You're just going to love her. And in person, and her talk is just wonderful. I think everybody can identify with where she was in her life and where she is now. And it's just a mesmerizing talk. So you're just going to love it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, to go from being a skeptic and doing the mountains of research, and now almost 200 hours of great conversations with people about the afterlife. I've gone from that skeptic to having faith to having a belief to now knowing that it is real. It is real, and it's, I don't always remember it 24/7 because I'm human, but when I do, and I keep myself empowered by having these shows, having these conversations with Christine, with others, being part of the Facebook group. I mean, when you can surround yourself with books and shows and friends and things like that, you live a whole different kind of life. We really do. So, Christine, any final words before we end?
Just I want people to know that your loved ones can still see and hear you, and believe the children if they're telling you that they're seeing someone, or if they're pointing out someone in a photo album who visits them, who they've never met in real life. So just believe them, because it's a gift from God.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Christine
Thank you. I love
Duminiak.
talking to you, Sandra. I hope to see you in person sometime.
Oh, I know it'll happen. And for our listener, thank you for being here this past hour. I want to remind you, WeDon'tDieRadio.com is a good home base where you can see all the past this is episode 179. Wow. And you were first on episode 23, Christine. So
Oh,
awesome.
wow.
But anyways, We Don't Die Radio, you can go to see all the past episodes. You can always click on the Insiders Club and read a free copy of my book and get a very healing audio called How to Survive Grief. So
Will all of this be available, this podcast, so I'll let people know?
Yeah, thanks. I will definitely send you the link as soon as it's ready. And of course, it's ready now for people listening, but then you can share it as well. So in closing, my name is Sandra Champlain, and I'm delighted to have been your host on We Don't Die Radio this past hour. And I do believe that life is an education for the soul, and that your life here on earth is important. And like Christine said, you're not alone. Your loved ones are a part of your life. So I want to thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.